WFYI podcast brought to you by Bloomington, Indiana, an American college town offering food and drink, college sports, outdoor activities, live music, cool art, and good times daily. Everyone is welcome in Bloomington. More information at visitbloomington.com.
We're going to take a trip right now. Like we always do about this time.
This is a journey into sound. Break it down.
I'm Kyle Long, and you're listening to Cultural Manifesto. According to a 2023 report from Luminate, formerly known as Nielsen SoundScan, over 120,000 new tracks are uploaded to the music streaming service Spotify every day. That's over 36,500,000 tracks per year. And according to that same report, over 45 million of those tracks never received a single play. That's bad news for musicians, as Spotify recently announced that it would cease making royalty payments for songs with less than 1,000 annual streams. But all hope is not lost. Ulyssa, an Indiana-based label, is dedicated to discovering and celebrating the vast trove of unheard music on Spotify. On this week's show, I'll speak with Ulyssa founders John Williamson and Eric Deines. John and Eric have issued a series of compilation tapes and digital releases sharing obscure music they've discovered on Spotify. The music Ulyssa is releasing is beginning to attract serious attention from the music press, most notably a series of albums featuring the Mississippi musician David Michael Moore. The online publication Pitchfork awarded Moore's album Adagio Fishing an 8-point rating. Ulyssa also issues a variety of lo-fi, electronic, and experimental music from across the globe. A recent release, titled Contrahouse, features the Grammy-winning pianist and singer-songwriter Bruce Hornsby. Stay tuned for the next hour as we take a deep dive into the world of Ulyssa. Let's join my conversation with John Williamson and Eric Deines. Thank you both for being here. I'm a huge fan of your label, and I've been looking forward to talking to you both. Do you want to introduce yourselves and whatever you want to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I'm John Williamson.
I'm Eric Deines, and together we run a label called Ulyssa that's based in Bloomington, Indiana, but partly in Indianapolis.
The music you're releasing through Ulyssa is very unique. It spans genres, it spans nations. There's trap music, gospel music. You have releases from artists in Japan, South Africa, Brazil, here in the U.S. as well. You've got about 20-some releases under your belt now, is that correct?
That's right, 25, I think.
Before we talk about the overall concept of the label, just tell us why you started putting out music. How was this label born?
So, as part of my day job at a different label called Jaguar, I used to make this weekly playlist called Jag Fridays, where it essentially was the things I was listening to that week. John mentioned to me that he was noticing how carefully constructed they were, and they were like little pieces of art. You know, I would pull things if it didn't work and try to make it just like this listening experience and not super esoteric. Like sometimes if a Stevie Wonder song is what really fit after this super esoteric thing, well, by God, put that in. John noticed this and was like, we should make these together and take some of our combined tastes. Meanwhile, John had identified a way to sort of subvert the algorithm on Spotify and do something in the search bar, which is a trade secret that we can't share on air, to subvert the sort of algorithm and what it would give you and almost go straight to the bottom of the Mariana Trench of these things that have existed there, maybe unbeknownst to even the artist who made them, because they put it on CD Baby in the 90s, and then CD Baby just threw it up on Spotify. John was already building an incredible tank of these finds and, gave me the keys of how to find it. And we just started identifying,
Became a bit of an obsession.
Yeah, there's an obsession to it. And, certainly 90% of the things you find should remain unfound. Maybe, I don't know. That's harsh. But then there's just these 10% of things that we become obsessed over, and they become like heroes to us in some way. And then if we, become obsessed enough, we say it's time to reach out to this or try, and often fail to find them,
So your partnership as a label started through making Spotify playlists. Is that accurate?
That is correct. Yeah. If you go to our Spotify profile and go far enough down, you'll see these things that's really the initial purpose. And we wanted to maybe get, poetic and have a site where we wrote about them in some beautiful way. And we did that for a minute. And then really we're like, let's start releasing things just to see what that feels like. And a friend of mine and a great jazz musician, experimental artist from LA named Sam Gendel, we had found this record of his that he only had made something like 30 copies of the LP or something. And, it was only on Discogs. You couldn't hear it anywhere. You couldn't hear it on YouTube. And we're like, Sam, just let us do it on a tape, just to see if we can put out a tape properly into the world. So low stakes, 100 copies only. But then we had to hit the brakes because he signed to Nonesuch and had 2 records to put out that year. And so we had this thing on ice. Along the way, we found a YouTube clip of Lou Reed playing at the Bluebird in Bloomington, Indiana in 1987. Someone had recorded the whole thing on a camcorder. The kicker is John Mellencamp's band is backing Lou Reed and sort of new sensation era Lou Reed. It's just the craziest document. The sound is terrible. It is the bootleggiest bootleg of all time, but we were like, maybe this could be Ulyssa #1, tip our hat to our town, Bloomington. Also, it's just such a curiosity find. It was also ended up being making a bootleg is a good way to kick the tires on how you make a tape. And it did well. Like day one, it kind of captured some imagination of our friends and then some people online. And we were like, whoa. We just paid for a tape. Like day one, it was like this crazy feeling, and we work for, real music industry institutions and in our day jobs, and yet just went ballistic over just so happy over, breaking even on a cassette, 100 copies of a cassette.
So your first release as Ulyssa was that Mellencamp Lou Reed live at the Bluebird in Bloomington.
Mellencamp and Reed,
cassette, yeah.
Mellencamp and Reed, Bloomington 87
yeah,
is what we call those.
You haven't gotten a cease and desist for that yet, have you?
I prayed for one every day because that's good. That's good online material. That goes right to the Instagram. Mellencamp Estate cease and desist. Oh.
To put into context kind of the sort of an underlying part of the label, you touched on this briefly. In the world of record collecting, there's this concept of crate digging, right? Where you're just digging through boxes and boxes of records at Goodwill and flea markets to find a gem or a jewel. You're sort of doing this in the digital world, right? Spotify and iTunes. There's millions of songs that are uploaded onto these platforms every year. And there's this history of sites like CD Baby, these early digital music sites that also were places where people uploaded hours and hours of music that might not have been heard. You're sort of culling through these endless numbers of self-releases, independent releases, and kind of hand-picking things that really are unique and stand out and issuing them on a compilation series. Is it Less Than 1,000, Hot Dogging, and Peacocking? Is that the title?
That's correct.
Okay, yeah.
That's correct. So far, there are 2 volumes of those, although there are sort of sub-genres of the under 1,000 designation.
Gotcha.
We can get to that in a second.
Tell me about that series and tell me about this sort of cyber crate digging that you're doing, because this must just be endless hours of listening to music online to find these. Is it?
Yeah, it definitely is. And, Eric and I, our friendship in the very beginning, back to day one, has always been talking about music. And we love all music, top to bottom. We just love it all. So this is a natural extension. I think a lot of what we find interesting is interesting because we can't place it. It's vernacular music that doesn't seem to be like part of a certain style or something like that. But yeah, it comes from the process of browsing, looking at album artwork, follow your nose. If it looks cool, click on it, listen to a sample. And then, more often than you'd think, you'll find an artist and you go, wow, this cover looks cool. You click on it. The first few seconds sound really cool. You click on the artist and it's like they've made 30 entire full-length albums. And they have this entire universe. And up at the top, it says 0 monthly listeners and not a single playlist, nothing. So they're all complete islands. Never, ostensibly, no one's ever heard them. Maybe their family and their community right when they put it out.
Often we will, when we get into an artist, it will be funny because you'll see that artist suddenly has 2 monthly listeners. And both monthly listeners are from Bloomington, Indiana.
Yeah.
And it makes me chuckle every single time I see it. To do the under 1,000 thing, to go back to that is just using Spotify's own sort of arbitrary designation for what number you start to see, a count next to a song. I think they have eliminated the use of the under 1,000 symbol now. Now it's just blank. But I don't know. I've always loved that symbol as sort of like, yeah, we're down here in the under 1,000 lifestyle, really doing the digging.
Yeah, it's an ethos. Like
yes.
we like it. We like to find the things under 1,000.
You mentioned that you have a hack to find this music through searches. Does Spotify and do other streaming platforms kind of suppress or block these releases that have less than 1,000 listens?
Yeah.
What do you know about that?
Hack and maybe more the
Right.
contemporary parlance of just sort of just a way. I don't think that they're
A
hiding
shortcut.
it.
Yeah.
It's a shortcut. It's just a trick. I don't think they're trying to suppress it, but of course, obviously, any company that's interested in making money is going to try to funnel things into the things that are working. So, the bands that are already big are going to get heard a lot. The artists that are already big are going to get heard a lot and put into the release radar and your whatever playlist the algorithmic playlists that tell you what's coming out and what's trending and all that sort of stuff. It's kind of like the opposite of that, but you can only find it through a browsing process because you wouldn't know who to search for. And I do think that streaming services in general, whether it be for music or video, do try to make it hard to do some serious browsing in the sense that you might do at a library or a bookstore or, an old video rental shop or something like that. So if you can find a way to set yourself up with a long list of things to go through, then yeah, eventually things will catch your eye.
And it's just a beautiful way to spend the clock strikes 5 on a Friday of work and you're like, okay, this is the last hour of the week here. I'm just going to go through this for a minute and let's see what we find and really, really browse for an hour. Even though collectively spending hours and hours and hours and hours doing it, I really just like is a nice sort of meditation for me personally to plug in that little shortcut and see what we find for 45 minutes.
And we've been doing this since 2020, so 2019, 2020. So there's, we'll go through whole eras where we're pretty sure we're not going to find a whole lot of new stuff. But it's just like you go through as any music fan knows, you always go through these doldrums where you're like, nothing's really that exciting lately. I haven't found a new band or a new scene or a new something. And then like clockwork, it always shows up and you go, wow, can't get enough of this. Yeah.
Does the title have any significance, hot dogging and peacocking?
Just sort of, the term peacocking when you're like showing off for folks, and hot dogging means the same thing. And I love the two terms next to each other. I've used it for a long time. I used it when we were in Charlotte together as a way, like what our scene was about. I'm just hot dogging and peacocking, you know?
Yeah, a lot of, it's worth saying too, just about Ulyssa in general, is that it from day one, we were just like, let's just make this like an art project. We were hanging out in our art studio that we rented together, painting, making ceramics, drawing. And so we thought that the funnest thing, and I've always my dream job when I was a teenager was to be a graphic designer. It never came to pass. So we just manufactured things to make art for. And so names like Hot Doggin' and Peacockin' are just funny things that Eric says or, whatever.
Are there other labels or individuals kind of mining the same territory that you are, digging through the underbelly of digital music and trying to kind of put it together in this coherent way?
Maybe not in the same way. I think it'd be difficult for me to say whether, we live in an era of people finding private press records and making huge records out of them. And that's a known process. But a label we were really just like spending time with recently and kind of or inspirations, at least, is music from memory. But it'd be difficult for me to say like where if they found some stuff in the Mariana Trench of DSPs or something,
I would just go ahead and say no. I don't think anyone's pulling from this same, like they're not at the same flea market digging through the bins. It feels like we're the first at the spot.
Yeah.
There are definitely other entities and labels that are interested in similar sounds, and they're finding them in other ways, usually through physical formats. That's how it comes across.
Sure. I don't know if this is like a sensible comparison, but it struck me that kind of what you're doing is sort of like a internet version of Harry Smith's Anthology of American Folk Music. Do you see any parallels there between the work he did and kind of compiling these obscure old-time records for a general audience to digest?
I wish that I had I would only hope that I would have the ability to be so focused as to put it out in some way that it feels that way. And that's actually one of the dilemmas that we, because we do this all on our own time and our own dime. So there are things that we have pulled aside, put into folders, talked about, shared, loved. There's just enough things to put 5 things out a month for the next 10 years already. So it could be like that.
I accept the comparison.
Okay. Yeah, it could be like that. But it would take a lot of work, and I can only hope that it can turn into something that people, think of that way or whatever. But I will say, I use the word vernacular all the time. I think it is like the stuff at least that interests us the most, or the people who seemingly are out there making music for themselves in their own world. Although who knows, you don't know until you meet them, if you ever can, get the context, but it feels that way. And then even as a side, it's too nerdy maybe, but as like a record producer or recording engineer, You get to hear every possible way. I mean, a lot of this stuff comes from the dawn of the personal computer, being able to have recording software at home and enter again CD Baby, a way to just get it out like a mass, product without a record deal. So a lot of what we're digging into is like it's not just lo-fi as like a style. It's like every possible bad recording to the point where, we don't think of it as good or bad. It's just like
accidental noise
what am I trying
music
to say?
sometimes that we have found people doing something in their home, and it is just scratches for 5 minutes where there should be a song, and they have somehow put it up anyway.
Or even songs that are like, if you were to break the parts, it would be a classic R&B song, like a song that anybody would know all the words to and play at a wedding or something like that. But the way the person recorded it at home in 1999 or whatever, it's like this one part is way too close and too loud, and everything else is way in the background. You can hardly hear it. Like just an endless, there's a bottomless pit of stuff like that I find really exciting. I get really excited about the fidelity and
I'm Kyle Long, and you're listening to Cultural Manifesto. My guests this week are John Williamson and Eric Deines, founders of the Indiana-based label Ulyssa. Ulyssa issues a variety of lo-fi, electronic, and experimental music from across the globe. They've even coined a new genre of music. They call it Toejazz. Let's return to our conversation. It does seem like you gravitate towards a certain type of sound. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the term Toejazz earlier, Toejazz. You've released 3 compilations of Toejazz music. You describe it in the descriptions on Bandcamp as sort of a mix of Tutu-era Miles Davis with the Sega Genesis game Toejam and Earl.
Which is the namesake for the
Tell me about this genre and what attracts you to this music.
In these deep dive searches, we started to find music that you could kind of, like a scene that had these people don't know each other. They're not a scene at all, but similar styles of synth jazz, synth bass, like sort of smooth jazz done slightly wrong, funk jazz done slightly wrong. And on a road trip together, I believe I was saying this really reminds me both I can hold it as like kind of Miles Davis-y too, which is a record I like that I don't think a lot of Miles heads like, but then also this Toejam and Earl soundtrack and many other video game soundtracks from the 90s. And I was like, we should do a compilation of these, put them all together instead of making it to our under 1,000 compilations, hot dogging and peacocking, a mixed bag. It's miscellaneous. But what if we had more of a focused sound on a certain compilation here? And oddly, we can't sell them here, but there is a shop in Japan called Tobira Records.
I would have guessed,
Tobira Records. That has saved, Taka Tobira, shout out if you hear this someday, somehow, has saved our lives. We'll put in a $300 order, always ordering 8 of the Toejazz tapes up top. And we're just like, I don't know how he is selling out of these, but he just is. We will come to Japan any old day. We will do Toejazz DJ sets in Shibuya, wherever you need us. It'll be wonderful.
I did want to say, though, as far as the aesthetic, I had been collecting these songs specifically, like finding them I've always followed like Boomcat world of things. I was a big fan of Actress, Dean Blunt, that kind of music. And so it really loved finding things that seemed accidental Actress, like something that's really, really like seems to sound avant-garde, but is like clearly just made in a home studio somewhere in 1995 or 2005.
So I know the label started with a bootleg release, and I don't know how much of this you want to get into, but I assume much of what you're doing now is you have contracts. This is all consensual with the artists. Mm-hmm. When you contact some of these folks who have 0 monthly listens on Spotify and maybe be just doing this in total anonymity, mm-hmm. Are they shocked? Are they surprised? Is there kind of a pattern of like the back and forth you have with the musicians you're reaching out to who may not have had anyone approach them about interest in their work? Now you want to put it on an album or a cassette or a digital release.
I think every one of them's been different, and we could sit here for 5 more hours and tell you each and every story. And hypothetically, we'd love to. It's like that's honestly ended up being maybe the most exciting thing about the project. Is we've had some that were 2+ year sagas just to even find a contact, and then we've had some that were really easy, and some people have a ton of confidence and just go, oh yeah, of course my music's cool and this sounds fun. Let's do it, and it's the easiest thing in the world.
Yeah, they're sort of like, 0% of 0 is 0, so might as well let you take a crack at it, that sort of mentality.
Yeah.
And then, but there's also levels of what our hopes for something are that I think we like the 2-year saga he mentioned, or we did a compilation for this Mississippi fella named David Michael Moore, who we immediately identified as potentially a genius out there making music that has been unrecognized by anybody. And we actually found him pretty quickly through a few different contacts. He just wouldn't pick up his phone. He's a bit of a hermit, and or majorly a hermit, and wouldn't pick up his phone. And then one night I just tried it randomly while I was cruising in my car, put it on the Bluetooth, and he answered. He's like, "Oh, so this is Eric. You've been trying to reach me." And I'm like, "Okay, here we go." And that's developed into a really, really special relationship for us. At the time, he had 8 or 9 albums out under a few different names. Songs would cross over on records for no good reason, and we really just proposed them. Let us make some sense of this, starting with maybe a greatest hits, which really means our favorite songs, and then systematically start getting your records back up, make them look of a piece, like an archival series type thing. Right now, it's only digitally this archival series, and then maybe one day we'll make a big $10,000 box set out of all these things, and that's like my big dream. And his music is truly knockout. It is like Zydeco music meets sort of Sufi, whirling dervish type music meets J.J. Cale, and he's an incredible player, makes his own instruments.
I did want to ask about your association with David Michael Moore. I think you've put out, is it 3 compilations now?
The first one is a true compilation of everything we kind of found, and we picked a ton of songs. It's very long.
Yeah.
And the most recent 2 things, going in no real chronological order, just kind of picking what we think is interesting.
We're going alphabetical.
I guess we are going alphabetical. Then we pick, we did an album of his, Adagio Fishing, and That came out at the end of last year. And then Bird had Burlando, which came out 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago. And, we're just going to kind of systematically kind of get these out for the next
like
year.
6 or 7 more. Yeah. These are
sure.
full-length albums that he had already released.
You mentioned he's a bit of a hermit. Does it matter to him that his music is finding an audience and being appreciated?
I think we've driven to meet him twice. And, the first time it was truly lovely, but, there was like standoffishness. Like, he didn't know who we are. By the second time we visited, I really felt like we felt like friends. And I don't think he's paying attention to anything that's happening. Maybe he is. We have a great old high school friend of his named Dr. Jim, who has really been sort of the conduit in how we learn about David, sharing things with us from his past, because he had a stroke maybe 8 years ago or something like that. And so he's all there, just limited sort of in conversation. He's getting every joke. He just can't keep up with the pace of things. His rhythm is still all there, though. I saw him play his little drum once, and I was like, oh, he's still got it in the hands. It's just maybe, it slowed him down verbally, for sure. And so Jim's been just like crucial in this whole process. And kind of at this point, it's just like you're doing more for him than anybody's done in 40 years.
It feels like
cook.
it feels like a little family, the people that care about Dave, his people, and we've been able to go down there and spend time with them twice now. We talk on the phone with them, email back and forth with them. So I know they definitely appreciate it.
Cultural Manifesto will return after this short break.
WFYI podcast brought to you by Bloomington, Indiana, an American college town offering food and drink, college sports, outdoor activities, live music, cool art, and good times daily. Everyone is welcome in Bloomington. More information at visitbloomington.com.
I'm Kyle Long, and you're listening to Cultural Manifesto. My guests this week are John Williamson and Eric Deines, founders of the Indiana-based label Ulyssa. Ulyssa issues a variety of lo-fi, electronic, and experimental music from across the globe. Let's hear a track from the label's latest release, a cassette-only reissue from the 24-year-old viral internet musician Julie Ragbeer. This is Julie Ragbeer with Mary Whitten Calkins, a song written about the pioneering American psychologist Mary Whitten Calkins.
Scientists got nothing on her. She made the way, yeah. She paved the way, yeah. Establishing laboratories just like that. She earned her spot, yeah. She earned her name, yeah. Like Mary Whitten Calkins, first NBA queen, like Mary Whitten Calkins.
That was Julie Ragbeer with Mary Whitten Calkins, the latest release from the Indiana-based label Ulyssa. My guests this week are Ulyssa founders, John Williamson and Eric Deines. let's return to our conversation as we discuss the Indianapolis music producer, Inga McDaniel, the subject of an upcoming release from Ulyssa. I did want to ask about your connection to an artist here in Indianapolis that you just happened upon randomly through this process of digging through the Spotify archives. Inga McDaniel. She's a synth player who makes really unique kind of lo-fi electronic music, kind of like the Actress sound that you were referring to earlier. How did you stumble on the music of Inga McDaniel, and how did you get connected to her in person here in Indianapolis?
We found it the exact same way on Spotify, with little to no action on that space. And just, the artwork is incredible. I assume she makes it all herself. And
John wrote me one day and said, I've found a queen of Toejazz. And he sent me one of her records. And I don't usually listen to what he sends me. I'll just go in and pick a different thing. Try to start from a different space, you know? And she has a record called The Business, which I think is a masterpiece record of Toejazz and maybe just kind of outsider funk in general. And we searched around for it. I kind of realized right away, maybe it was like a LinkedIn profile. I was like, dude, I think she's from Indianapolis. And one of us found a number at some point, and John was staying in my place that same weekend. And we got her number, and we just called her. And she answered. She emailed us back. We found her email. She emailed us back, hit us with her number. She said, I'm better, just call me. And we called her immediately. We just happened to be together. She lives 9 blocks from my front door. Like an unbelievable twist of fate. And we just said, you want to meet us at the Pawn Shop Pub? And she met us at the Pawn Shop Pub. It was totally lovely. We spilled our freaking guts for her, and she was all in. You know, I was like, we're two goofy looking white dudes, but give us a shot. And she's down with it. And just this weekend, you know, it's been this kind of, you know, there's no rush here. Finally hit her with like our version of a one sheet sort of deal about what we owe her and what we're asking from her. And it's short and sweet, all good to go. But hopefully we have a compilation out of hers, of our favorite songs, maybe some stuff she's not released in the next 6 months. You know, we've been toying with the idea of making it our second piece of vinyl we've ever done. Wow. So, which I think will sound good on vinyl.
That would be amazing, yeah.
Let's go.
Are there releases on the label that I haven't asked you both about that are favorites that you'd want to share, tell people about?
Well, our first real big swing at vinyl is happening right now. It came out on Friday, and it's called Contrahouse, and it's just a concept for a record that we kind of dreamed. That, you know, we have a love for this, all ECM eras, but there is just sort of this section of ECM in the 80s, mid-80s, that's maybe odder sounds and more synth sounds. And we wanted, some of it reminds me of this Larry Heard record called Sceneries Not Songs Volume 1. And I guess the idea was sort of born of that, something in there, like, Larry Heard should be on ECM. How come that's not so? And let's make, what if ECM put out House 12 inches? And who would we make a House 12 inch with? Oh, we have these great friends in Rio de Janeiro who we did a compilation for, who are two true brilliant producer minds who make great dance music. They are our favorite label on the planet Earth. It's called 40% Mannerissimo. Yeah. 40% Photo Mannerissimo.
That's my favorite compilation I think you've put out.
Right
it's
on.
Amazing. Yeah.
And the fact that they're not being flown all over the world to do this, I think is a huge travesty, the music they make. And so we really just hit them with this funny concept of try to make an ECM house record, and we will get American pianist Bruce Hornsby to riff over the top of it, and you get a second cut of that. And then maybe I'll write some lyrics, and we'll get this singer that I love from Norway named Jenny Conradsen to sing, and then you can get another edit of that, and just this kind of game of global telephone and see what happens. And we called it Contrahouse, to mean like the other house. And it's an incredible, it's 4 long form songs. We listened to it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. So I'm not sure I'm the best to even talk about it at this point, but it's now out everywhere digitally. Vinyl's going to land in about a month. Go to our Bandcamp. We need to sell about 200 more copies to break even on this bad boy. So help. We can do a little fun. You do fundraisers on air all the time.
Let's start the telephone.
I did want to ask about your interest or relationship with Bruce Hornsby. I've seen a lot of references to him on your social media. Tell me about that.
Of course, we know The Way It Is because it was an inescapable song. I was born in 1981. That song was just always around as of the late 80s through the 90s, through Tupac sampling it. It just followed me through life. But I happened to have a stepmom when I was 6th, 7th grade who had great taste in music, just dusty CD towers, and I would go and just pilfer it because she wasn't listening to them anyway. And so I would take Chris Whitley CDs and Jayhawks CDs and kind of really inform myself on that. So I always call it stepmom core type music for this very reason. But I grabbed not just The Way It Is, but songs from the South Side, Hot House, like a few Hornsby records that are less popular, and got to know them. And he's just been, I don't know, I think he is, surely he would just, his toenails would curl if I compared him to Keith Jarrett to his face. But I think he does some things with that sort of, his two hands can do Keith Jarrett-like maneuvers on the piano. And I think he is unrecognized as a truly brilliant pianist. And I wanted, an opportunity came to potentially work with him at Jaguar 5 years ago. I could not get it through the A&R gauntlet, which is okay. Happens all the time to all my colleagues. But what did happen out of that is I got to be friends with Bruce Hornsby. And, every once in a while we just text about college basketball or whatever. And he's been down to clown with some weird ideas. Like for a Jag compilation, I wanted him to cover Dinosaur Jr.'s Feel the Pain. He did it just in a day. He went to his studio and covered Feel the Pain.
Speaking of basketball, the first time I was ever copied on an email with him, he said, am I speaking to John Williamson, the ABA star from, whatever, Super John Williamson? He's a basketball head.
Yeah, he's in that. And so it's a really special record. I don't know if we actually made the idea real, the ECM 12, Deep House 12-inch. It is something else, but that became the fun part along the way.
That was Contrahouse with American Bottoms, featuring Bruce Hornsby on keyboards. That song was issued by the Indiana-based label Ulyssa, and Ulyssa founders John Williamson and Eric Deines are my guests this week. Let's return to our conversation. Any thoughts either of you want to share on the future of Ulyssa? I mean, right now this is something you're kind of doing off hours, right? Mm-hmm. There's probably an endless amount of source material out in the universe of Spotify. What do you see the future? How do you envision the future for Ulyssa?
It's hard to say. We already have quite a few, like a half a dozen projects that we're definitely going to put out that are, in this year. So the thing to do is to put those out, and talk about them. We have fun making the art, writing about them. And then when they're out, we and this is in a way of answering your question is, it's not like this stuff's burning up the charts. So depending on the feedback that we get overall, will basically determine, if we could put out more of them more frequently or put them out in ways that maybe could, are more accessible to people than a cassette tape. We love the format of cassette tape and we think of it as a real, toss it across the room to your friend kind of thing. But we realize it's not, what people buy.
And my interest in cassette tapes was sort of born of our studio situation. We don't have a lot of room in there. And for a long time, now I've broken this rule too many times, but I had a rule: no laptops, no screens in the art studio. Don't get them out, keep the screens closed and make the work or whatever. So that eliminated playing music from a DSP. So cassettes were the way to go and they don't take up a lot of room. And then I just started to fall in love with everything about them. And, I grew up in the era of singles and cassettes. They were, I would always go to the wall at Musicland at the Anderson Mall and snag those.
John and Eric, I can't thank you enough for doing this today. I'm a huge fan of what you're doing. I mentioned this earlier. I think it's one of the most interesting and exciting music projects happening in the state of Indiana today. Anything I didn't ask you about? Any final thoughts you want to share with the listeners?
No. I only might add, the future of Ulyssa is we have sort of some ambitions to spend a year just making art books. And we love art and art books. Obviously, we mentioned our space and I'm excited for that. We have too many ideas to contain sometimes that it's we go back and forth on what can be next and what should be next. And I don't know. Maybe
we're working on a screenplay.
That's not a joke, which I feel is the cheesiest way to end this interview. I'm working on a screenplay, but it is not a joke. I have wanted to write this very particular sort of adaptation of a novel for a long time. This year was the year I was I will finish this by the end of February, and just a crappy first draft. So we'll see. And it's very Ulyssa, I might add. Ulyssa Pictures. Here we come.
If you need a second to think about, did you want to say something, John?
No.
Is there a track from the vast catalog of music you've issued that you'd want to leave folks with? Take a second if you need it.
You got to play David Michael Moore, Buster Buster. I feel like it has been my number one most listened to song for 4 years when Spotify does the Spotify Wrapped. I mean, I love this man and I love this song. I feel like this song is. Well, what were you going to say?
Let's go with Buster Buster.
Buster Buster. David Michael Moore's
First
Buster
thought,
Buster.
best thought.
Thank you guys so much. I appreciate you taking time to be here.
Thank you.
Hey, Buster, Buster. Now, the last time I saw you, man, you was walking on the road at Rose Hill, carrying your teeth in your hand. You said, take me to town, little Bobby. Let's trade these stamps for some beer. We go be crazy drunk at the bar pits. Get the hell away from here.
That's all the time we have for this week. Thank you to my guests, John Williamson and Eric Deines of Ulyssa. Check out the Cultural Manifesto podcast at WFYI.org or wherever you listen to podcasts. Cultural Manifesto is hosted and produced by me, Kyle Long. Thank you for listening.